Lamar.
Oh, that one?
Yeah, that one.
Okay, I was a student nurse in the Huntington Memorial Hospital in Pasadena. And I was probably in my junior year, I think, close to the end of my junior year. And I had one of my classmates was insisting that I meet this friend of her boyfriend. She was engaged to this Bob when she went into nurses training, and so they got married the first summer that we were in training. And so they insisted that I meet this friend of Bob's, and so finally I said okay. So I went on this double date with them, with this sailor. And his name was Lamar Smith, and he was from Anaheim. And you know, I was from Santa Ana, and Santa Ana and Anaheim had a real grudge match, and I would never have married anybody from Anaheim in high school. That was just out of this reason. So anyway, I went on a couple of dates with him, and to tell you the honest truth, I don't even remember where we went on a date. We were in the back seat of this car of Bob and Bonnie's, and wherever we went, I don't know. It could have been a show. It could have been, I don't know where it went. Anyway, so I didn't really like Lamar too much at first, but he asked me out again, and so we went someplace else, and he was a very nice person, but he was from Anaheim, and so I went with him a few times, and he, of course, he was in the Navy, but he was stationed by then. Okay, I'm gonna rewind it. I'm gonna go back a little ways and tell you that when I was accepted into the cadet nurse corps that they had formed during the Second World War, because they needed nurses badly for the services, and so they had the government had formed this cadet nurse corps. Well, we had been accepted, our class, my very oldest girlfriend and I had been accepted into this class that started in September. Well, the war ended in August that same year, and so we were wondering whether they were going to continue with that nurse corps, and so finally they said, well, since we had been accepted already, they would allow us to go through on this cadet corps, which we did. So I know that I was approaching my senior year, but I was living in Pasadena, and Lamar was stationed very close to his home in Anaheim. Because the war had ended, the rules for passes and living off base and so forth were relaxed, and he was at home a lot off the base, and so he was living in Anaheim or close to it, and I was in Pasadena, so that doesn't make for very good dating, and so when I had a couple of days off, I would usually get on the trolley that went through to Santa Ana. It was really fun, and I'd go home for a couple of days, and so he would come over, and we would go usually to the movies, or was a date. That was a date. And I can remember one time he, being in the service, he didn't have a lot. He didn't have money. He didn't have very much money at all. So he had some kind of a dollar that was worth a whole bunch of money. I mean, it was worth a lot more than a dollar.
Mm-hmm.
So we were going to go to the show this one night, and he didn't have the money, so he sold that thing. He sold it so that he could go to the show. And in the meantime, my sister, who was older, Marion was older, she had a little boy, and she had talked me into babysitting with that child. And so when Lamar came, I told him, I said, well, we're going to have to stay here because I said I was going to babysit. He was kind of upset about that because he had sold
his dollar.
What kind of a dollar was it? Some kind of anyway, that was worth a lot. And so that was the thorn in our side for quite a while, that he had done that. So then we went together. We only went together about 6 months before we were engaged.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Christmas before we were to be married, my grandfather and grandmother lived up in Washington, and Grandpa had died just before Christmas. And so the older ones in my family drove up to Washington. I couldn't, of course, because I was still in school, but I can remember that Christmas that we went together, and then we were married the following February, and the school of nursing that I attended did not have a large enough pediatrics department, and didn't have a large enough psychiatric department, and so we would affiliate at different places to get that kind of training. So I was when I got married, I was in Compton Sanitarium, the psychiatric, and so I was working in the locked ward, and so I worked Saturday morning, and my aunt came to pick me up to take me back down to home, and then we were married in Anaheim at this wedding chapel. So I worked in the morning. We were married in the afternoon. We went down to Carlsbad to spend one night at Carlsbad, and then we had to be back the next day. I had to go back, and after that weekend. So
Oh, wow.
that was the early part. And Lamar was really quite resourceful. That he had put I don't know whether anyway, he was in the process of having this home in Anaheim built before we were ever married, and so we moved into this brand new little house. And that house is on Gilbert Street in Anaheim, and we looked it up recently. We paid $8,750 for that house.
Wow.
It was $50 a month. I
Wow.
can remember that. Well, I had all these little envelopes for all this little money for each, all the month. All this money had to go this, and this. When we were both working, he was getting $50 twice a month, and I was getting $50 twice a month.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we were living on. But anyway,
Wow.
house payment was $50 a month. And we looked that up recently, and do you know that little house on Gilbert Street is listed at $450,000.
Wow.
Do you
Same
believe
house.
It's crazy. Yeah.
that it's that old? But it was a little house, and it was, oh my gosh. Anyway, that's what happened there, and then.
So I guess you started to like him. I guess you started to like him.
I decided.
Grandpa, you decided that you liked him.
No, not really. Yes. I did. I did. I didn't tell you this one thing. My mom lived in this little apartment in Santa Ana, and so this is where I went home to, when I had time off. I'd never lived there myself, but this is where I went to with my mom when I had time off. But Lamar came, to pick me up, and in those days, let me tell you, everybody smoked.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell that by the old movies. If you watch old movies, they always had, everybody smoked. Well, of course, Lamar had been in the Navy for 4 years, and he was, baptized and raised LDS, but being in the Navy from the time he was 17 years old, he got away from the church, and so he was smoking in it. Oh, my mother. When he smoked, he lit a cigarette, I think, in the living room, and she goes over and she lifts up the window and she goes like this, she couldn't stand. And that was the introduction that he got to my mother.
Oh dear.
Oh well, that was funny.